Hi, everyone. Ted Wyman here with another edition of Jets Setting. And today I'm joined by Winnipeg Sun hockey writer Scott Billeck, who's been covering the Jets all this week as they play a long homestand. And they are 0-1-1 in the last couple of games. They didn't play particularly well and got shut down by the New York Islanders on the weekend, but a much better performance against the St. Louis Blues on Tuesday really the Blues steal a win with Jordan Binnington, a win in the shootout. Scott, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts were that the Jets played a game that if they can play, consistently throughout the year, they won't have any issues going forward. And they were just so good possession wise, so good in terms of one closing out the middle of their own ice. I believe high danger chances were 19-6 in favor of the Jets. I mean, everything that they wanted to do coming out of that Islanders game. Paul Maurice talked about no chaos. They needed more chaos in front of the net. If you look at Neil Pionk's goal, he basically fired it through the whole, about 10 guys on the ice. And it was just one of those things where the Jets kind of took what they needed to do and actually did it. And that was a big part of their success. They played very, very, very well against the Blues and deserved far better. And like you said off the top there, Jordan Binnington is the only reason that game was made it anywhere close to overtime. He just had some unbelievable saves, one off of Blake Wheeler again, another one off of Mark Scheifele, who just can't buy one right now. But again, this team is buzzing and they're playing a very good style of hockey and it's conducive to winning. And I think, 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, they're winning that game. And so, yeah, I don't, Blake Wheeler said it best after the game. And oftentimes players after games will say, oh, we lost but we did a lot of good things, right? And whatever. No, Blake Wheeler was right this time. They did everything they needed to do to win that game. There wasn't a whole lot you could take away from that game and say, oh, this is why we lost. No, they just got goalied. And that was pretty much the end of story when it came to that. So what did you see from the game? I know we were talking a little bit of Jansen Harkins, the Scheifele line. What are your kind of thoughts on that one?
Well, the thing that stands out for me from the last couple of games is that the Jets haven't been all that good at putting the puck in the net. And one of the things we assumed with this team was that it would be very good offensively. And you've got very strong players on the top three lines, really. You got great balance there in terms of you should be able to generate a lot more. And obviously there's been great offense from the defense. So a bit of a surprise that they've been shut down the way they have. This one, of course, was a different one. That was a 3-2 game in a shootout, but it easily could have been 5-2 for the Jets or something like that. It certainly seemed like they had full control, but you wonder, I think people are starting to wonder a little bit, when is Mark Scheifele going to score a goal? When is Blake Wheeler going to score? When is this team going to really emerge as that three-line team that you've been that you look on paper and you see, and Kyle Connor has had just a fantastic start to the season. Pierre-Luc Dubois, Nikolai Ehlers, Andrew Kopp, those guys are really putting up the points, but the balance hasn't been there. It's actually in reverse from some other years when Scheifele and Wheeler did all the scoring and no one else was doing it, and now they're the ones that aren't really chipping in. And you have to think that they're still being eased back by Paul Maurice a bit from both having COVID. There may be some lingering effects. It takes a little while, and Blake Wheeler is certainly older. But you'd sure like to see that pairing, those two together, start to produce a little more. And I think when they do, you're not going to see the Jets lose a game like that, because those guys normally are not missing on the opportunities, particularly Scheifele, are not missing on the opportunities like they had.
Yeah, and I'll counter with this. I thought the Scheifele's line was the best line on the ice last night. They were very good, and creating a lot of havoc in the other zone, grinding the Blues down in their own zone with Adam Lowry, kind of playing that kind of, it's not an enforcer role, more of a, just that power forward grinding type role, and it's working well for them. They're getting chances. I think this is always the big thing about teams or goalie or players that are on scoring slumps, is if you're not getting the goal, well, are you at least producing the chances that could lead to one? And I think that's the case here. I mean, we've talked about this with Nikolai Ehlers a lot. He wouldn't be scoring, but he'd be getting 5 or 6 goals a game, or 5 or 6 shots a game. Sorry, and so like those chances are there. And so I'm finding that with Mark and Blake and even Adam Lowry as well, that's where they're doing that. They're working, they're cycling the puck down low, they're getting that ozone time where it's conducive to scoring. And I think that it's going to get there. I think the one of the things that you said and I picked up on was, you were seeing the, kind of Kyle Connor and the Dubois and the Cops and scoring. Well, that's a good thing, because I think when Scheifele and Wheeler start to score, you're just going to have more goals in the back of the net, right? Like, I mean, you've kind of seen this kind of youth. I want to call it a youth movement, because I think Mark Scheifele is still partly part of that. But I think you're seeing some of the younger guys really taking bigger roles in this game. I mean, we can talk about Pierre-Luc Dubois, obviously having an incredible season last night, putting his shoulder down 3 times to drive to the net like that. Those are things that you want to see from what essentially is the top line center at the moment. But with Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, they're going to get their points. And I think when the Jets do, I mean, they're not going to be in these 2-2 games going into overtime, or these 1-goal games. There's going to be far more, distinction on the scoreboard, because the Jets are going to be ahead, because they have, like you talked about, kind of all 3 lines rolling. They really do have those lines rolling right now. It's just not there on the production aspect of it, and so it'll get there. And I also thought sort of that the 4th line last night was pretty good. But what's your take on Jansen Harkins? He was the guy. Well, he wasn't on the 4th line, but he's moved up and he played on the 2nd line last night. But what was your take on Jansen Harkins' game, getting that opportunity maybe over a Vesalainen or somebody else? What did you think of his game?
Well, it's just one game, and he's a guy who's being elevated from a bottom 6 role into a real opportunity with top 6 players. I didn't think that he was particularly good last night. I thought that there was definitely some times when he kind of made plays that kind of killed offensive zone time. And
Right.
again, you're not going to put too much blame on a guy. I don't know that I ever thought that Jansen Harkins was going to be elevated into a top 6 role with this team with any regularity. It's a one-off. He plays a different role with this team, but this was a look at him in a role where there was a little bit more importance to what he could do with the puck. And I didn't think it was great, but you never know if he'll get another chance. We'll see what happens with Paul Stastny. I don't think he's expected to be out too long, but it's funny. You talked about Pierre-Luc Dubois and those net drives. And I mean, I was watching with a friend and we both sort of said, was that Pierre-Luc Dubois or Jaromir Jagr? With one hand on the stick, and the way that he can control the puck with one hand on the stick is pretty impressive. I still think there's a bit of an issue with him sometimes in terms of how he takes passes and even how he dangles with the puck, because he seems to bobble it a little bit here and there. But when it comes to that pure power move like he did last night, that's really something to behold. And obviously another thing that came to mind about the game last night was Connor Hellebuck, who comes back, and this is a guy he's had a baby recently. His family's had a baby recently.
Right.
But he was sick, not with COVID, but not feeling well at all, and finally comes back in. And you're kind of wondering again, how long is it going to take a guy to get back into it? Well, it didn't take long. He had a pretty strong game, not as strong as Jordan Binnington, but pretty strong. And is he ever going to learn how to handle the puck though, Scott? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. That's it's interesting. We tend to call it the adventures of Connor Hellebuck in the press box, because there's times last night where he made the right play with the puck. Great crisp pass. A little bit of a misdirection on the forechecker coming in to make sure that he had to do the long way around behind the net and all that. But there was also a couple times where he kind of double clutched it and then didn't really pass it to anybody other than leaving it kind of a 50-50 between other guys. And then there was just times where I remember the one, I think I might have been in the first period still, he's sitting there and he's gone behind the net, and then he's trying to get back. He almost falls over. He's holding onto the crossbar, trying not to fall over. Eventually one of those is going to cost him. It has in the past, and we've seen that. So we'll see how it goes. I thought he was fine though. I mean, in terms of his actual goaltending, I thought he was very good. He probably want the second one back there. Sorry, the first one back there. But that happens. We got to think that this guy hasn't played a game in over a week. Hasn't really practiced in over a week. He did practice on Monday, but hadn't gotten a lot of ice time. And obviously, new father, probably not sleeping the greatest at night, and was quite ill right after his wife had their child. Came down with some sort of illness. It wasn't COVID, but it was enough to for him to say that he wouldn't have been able to play through it, he said. So
Right.
yeah, that was one of the things. And I'll just go back to Jansen Harkins real quick, just to kind of counter your point. I'm just not argument's sake, but Jansen Harkins had a good game, and sort of to your point though. Paul Maurice talked about in the morning that Jansen Harkins needs to be a shoot first player. That's what they want him to be. And there was one play out of that game, and I'm pretty sure that this will be on Paul Maurice's mind, where Jansen Harkins is coming down the ice on a 2-on-1. He's got the puck and he doesn't elect to pass. And so you're like, okay, well, he's going to shoot the puck. And he did this earlier in the game and he shot wide, and that's fine. At least he shot the puck. But in this specific play, he held the puck and then he just kept holding it, and he held it until he was behind the goal line and no shot was off. And that is the indecisiveness that I think is keeping Jansen Harkins from moving up in this lineup, from getting more minutes in this lineup. We've seen it. We've talked a lot about Jansen Harkins, and I wrote about this in today's Winnipeg Sun, is that his biggest thing is in training camp, he looks great against, other hopefuls and playing bigger minutes and all that kind of thing. But when it comes down to his less time in the NHL, and when the opportunity comes for him to kind of put a stamp on maybe, being that next guy to play on that third line or whatever it might be, it just hasn't been there for him. And that's kind of the one thing where Jansen Harkins really needs to take advantage of opportunity. I think he gets that shot off. It's a grade A opportunity for him that he just didn't pull the trigger on. And I don't understand why. And that's, I get it. Like, there's a lot of nerves going on there, but Jansen Harkins just needs to play his game, because we've seen it at other levels. But when it comes to the NHL, it's like he's indecisive, and that's the thing that's kind of holding him back. So again, we'll see. I mean, Paul Stastny took a shot off the foot, as we said. It's really uncertain with him. And Paul Maurice said, all the tests came back negative, nothing broken. That's great, but bruising and swelling and all that, and just being able to kind of put pressure on it. Paul Maurice wasn't entirely sure when Paul Stastny would be back, but I think there's one tell here, is that if they thought Paul Stastny was going to be out for longer than a week or maybe 2 games, I think they would have put him on IR to get the cap relief. So that probably bodes well for him playing maybe Thursday or at least on Saturday. And so, that we're kind of reading between the lines there, but that's what we're paid to do. And so I kind of look at that and see that as, I think that bodes well for Stastny to return potentially against the Sharks on Thursday, and if not, against on Saturday night there. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But again, I think the Jets played a great game last night, and I don't think fans should be hanging their head. They didn't get the 2 points; they got 1 though. But I'm not trying to bring up the pom poms here either. But they just played a sensational game that I think is very, very promising if you're looking for how this team has come offensively and even defensively last night in trying to really shut down what is a pretty good St. Louis Blues team. So yeah, I think that bodes well kind of going forward.
Yeah, and one player that we wouldn't have talked about yet because he didn't play last night, but has been one of the best stories of the season, is Eric Comrie, the backup goalie
Right.
for the Jets, who went in place of Hellebuck, and he's played very, very well. He's got 3 wins. He
Yeah.
was in for a game where they lost 2-0, but he certainly wasn't the reason why they lost.
Yeah.
And that's actually some great news, because you and I talked at the start of the season. That was one of the biggest question marks with this team, was could Eric Comrie handle that load? And it certainly seems like he could, and he can. And I think when you're looking at things that we were watching for at the start of the season, the revamped defense certainly seems to be doing pretty well. I like their puck movement. I like the way they were getting the puck out of the zone last night. It was really smooth up to the forwards, and that's one of the reasons why the Jets were so able to generate so many offensive chances and certainly shot attempts. And the forward lines have just been so unusual. It's nothing that we expected at the start of the year, to see the players where they are because of the COVID situation with Scheifele and Wheeler. But I guess we'll just wrap this up, Scott, with a last thought from you on where you think the Jets stand in terms of expectations for them coming in. There's a lot of people talking Stanley Cup for this team at the start. We've seen, they're not looking like Edmonton or Carolina right now, but they're looking pretty good. How do you assess it?
I think they're a work in progress towards that, and I think they can turn into a very top tier contender this season if they keep doing the stuff that they did last night or on Tuesday night against the Blues. And that's the type of game that's going to win you playoff games, right? It was quick in the transition. It was they had 68 shot attempts in the game. They were getting to the middle areas of the ice and getting shots off in there and creating traffic and havoc and all that stuff. and they got pretty good goaltending. So, I think they have the components there to turn it. It's going to all come down to consistency. I thought, you talked about, maybe the Islanders game was great. I actually thought the Jets played a little reasonably well, but their issue was they couldn't really handle that suffocating style. And part of that is, quicker, crisper passes. The outlet passes have to be so quick in that because you're trying to get through the neutral zone and there's sticks in every lane. I think they learned from that a little bit just moving into this St. Louis Blues game, because St. Louis Blues, not as suffocating. They don't play that trap style in the same way, but they were still strong on the forecheck. So I think that's just one of those things where, if the Jets can start doing what they did last night more consistently, then yes, you put them in that conversation. We haven't, this team we haven't seen them play against a Carolina or a Colorado yet. That is coming. We're going to see those teams. And those are big tests. I thought they played the Islanders rather well. The Islanders didn't run out of and this is a hardened Islanders playoff team, right? They've lost past 2 years in the Eastern Conference Final. And arguably, if Tampa wasn't there, I think the Islanders win at least one of those cups. And so you kind of look at that team being, very much a Stanley Cup team, and the Jets weren't run out of the building by them. They actually played rather well, and they were using their backup goalie in that situation. And you talked about Eric Comrie; he's obviously been great. So yeah, I just think that the pieces of the puzzle are there. Paul Maurice and the team and the players, they just got to figure out a way to get them to fit. And once they do, if they can, I think you're looking at a team that can make a big push in the playoffs.
All right, Scott, thanks very much. That's more great analysis and insight. You've been watching Jet Setting on winnipegsun.com.